Item 4 is an informational presentation regarding an industry outreach for advancement of the high-speed rail program. Mr. Vacca, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I come before you today to provide some information on the authority's approach to soliciting outreach to the industry, both in the construction industry, high-speed rail operators, financing and investment industry, so that we can solidify our approach for the next round of procurements. As you've heard this morning, both in a public session and with Mr. Jarvis's presentation, that the construction of Central Valley is moving forward aggressively and in meeting our timeframes for that civil construction. Last year, the governor's budget and with the approval of cap and trade greatly increased market interest in our program and is leading to additional opportunities for advancing our program. Last August, this body encouraged us to explore ways to leverage that cap and trade program and to facilitate advancement of the program towards a accelerated schedule. And this is part of that strategy in looking at ways to leverage cap and trade to advance the program in a faster, more efficient, and economical way. The interest increased dramatically after the passing of cap and trade. In this program, we have met with individuals informally, companies, construction companies, investment firms, and others have come in on one-on-one discussions with some of their individual ideas and demonstration of interest to be part of this program. We've also met with 9 train manufacturers earlier this year in an expression of interest that we had on train set procurement, and met with them on a one-on-one basis and explored their ideas on how to advance this program.
Frank, I'm looking at, I guess this is page 3, this one, and it says statements of interest from the private sector. What statements of interest?
Some examples on some of the statements made right there. As
I see the
examples.
statements, but those aren't statements of interest. Tell me what statements of interest. Did someone actually say they had an interest in investing in high-speed rail?
We have had firms come in and meet with us and said they are interested in our program, have been doing some work to evaluate how they can participate and are interested in participating.
Ask you the question again, Frank. Has anyone come in and indicated an interest at this point in time to invest in high-speed rail? And if so, under what basis?
No,
well,
we do not have a specific proposal for investment. What we have are statements of interest, and this is the lowercase I interest. They are seeking opportunities.
Seeking opportunities, informal meetings that they have requested.
Through the chair, if I can
Go ahead, Mr.
follow up Mr. Rossi's line of questions. Some of these inquiries have been is a pre-step to actually making a proposal to invest, or are they just trying to gather some financial and other factual data to determine whether a private investment is actually something that would be feasible?
In my opinion, we've seen both. We've seen some that are just exploring whether the possibility might be something they'd be interested in developing a proposal. Others seem to be had more information, had done more work, and were considering the opportunity of putting an informal proposal in. We have not seen anything presented as of yet.
So the discussion of the Las Vegas Palmdale private investment, how would you characterize those discussions, if any?
We've met with teams.
How many?
We've met both formally with the other railroad, Express West, as well as an investment firm, and who is representing some construction companies separately. So we've had several discussions for that segment.
But nothing firm yet in terms of
We have nothing presented formally.
Is that because of the stage of the development of the high-speed rail, or is that because they're still evaluating the feasibility
I think there's a number of areas. Some of them are not directly for me, but one is the the maturity of the cap-and-trade program and how that can be utilized for financing. It's the maturity of the program as we're just getting to the point of looking outside of the Central Valley as the next segment. So there's a number of factors that are timing issues that are influencing where we are in that process.
When you say ensuring the cap and trade, is that trying to assess how long the revenue stream will be there, given?
I've heard that as one of the issues.
Because of its political nature? Or?
Mr. Fine could answer these questions more directly. However, there's been a couple issues with the history with the cap and trade, insufficient at this time, and for what the actual legislation that is directly related to how that impacts long-term investment.
Thank you.
The problem you have is that cap and trade has a sunset date of 2020. So
well, I want to make sure we're careful that we're not making a simple declarative statement around that. I think that there are some people who allege that the program was intended to be self-continuing.
It doesn't make any difference. The law is what it says. So people can allege what they like, but the law is clear. The question then becomes, can you get beyond 2020? And I think that's being addressed in a number of areas. And I think we also have to be careful here about, I mean, your answer to the question about two types of interest. I'd like to know about the second type of interest. Is that there's more than people who have more data and you think we're going to make a proposal? What would that proposal look like?
We will know that.
Let me just take a step back from this, if I might. I think what the staff is proposing is that they go out to the private sector to ask them if they have an interest in the program at this point, given the understanding of where the program stands right now, in stepping forward with some type of proposals. Now, whether that's a good idea or not, I think ought to be the subject of the conversation, but I don't think we can know what the proposals would be unless we ask. So I would simply offer that it seems to me that the nature of the discussion today, I would humbly suggest, is does it make sense for us at this point to have such an outreach? If there's some downside to that, or it doesn't make sense, or we think it's going to waste staff time and resources, that's fine. But I guess, at least for my own part, I don't know how to evaluate what we would get in terms of answers to determine whether we think those answers would justify going out and asking the question. So to me, the issue before us is, does it make sense at this point in the program to go out and do this?
If I might interject, one of the impetuses of coming forward on this formalized expression of interest is that we have had multiple meetings with investors, construction companies, people that have shown interest, but no formal proposals, nothing in writing has come forward. We are coming to a point in this program where we need to make decisions on the next round of procurements. And we need to make a decision on the approach we're going to take for those next round of procurements. This formal EOI, expression of interest, is to solicit proposals, understanding, and suggestions from industry on how to move forward, where we would either receive proposals based on, the next approach after this expression of interest would be a formal RFP based on what we gain from the expression of interest. And we either move forward where we solicit proposals, or we move forward on a different approach to solicit to move forward on those procurements. But we're in a point in the next 12 months where we need to move forward on a next group of technical procurements, power, track, systems, in order to meet our business timeframes. And this would be the next logical step towards helping us make that decision.
But that would be an RPF to acquire something.
Right.
That's different than a request for or the opportunity to have someone invest or to arrange a set of financing that would be reasonable over time for this authority to approve. So which is it? I mean, if you're talking about an RPF, that's an issue of whatever it is we need. how we finance or acquire the articles under consideration are a different issue. And so, and you would actually talk, in some cases, to a supplier for supplier credits, but you would also talk to maybe, if it's a foreign supplier, for those things, it could be supplied on a foreign basis. You might talk about export finance, or you might talk about a potential equity investment predicated on the view of the supplier as to what they think the returns would be on a leverage basis, so they get a leveraged IRR, which is bigger than a direct IRR or unleveraged IRR. What are we talking about? I'm just trying to figure out what it is we're talking about here. All of the above?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, there's a broad range, and if you step back, before, and cap and trade really was a very significant step forward, even with the uncertainties that it has. We saw a demonstrable shift in our discussions with the private sector, because they recognized it for what it was, which was a clear and strong statement by the governor, by the legislature, that the state was committed to seeing this program move forward. And I don't know that people have always fully appreciated the limitations of Prop 1A, and that, you know, it's one-time funding, has to be matched. It is not an ongoing revenue stream. And so cap and trade really represented a shift. What we're looking to do, and that gives us new opportunities to also shift our procurement approach, which had been basically sequential, and move on from one construction package to another, and then you go vertically. We've had a lot of discussion with the private sector about more efficient ways of procuring things, whether it's in combination with financing or just a straight procurement. So what we're looking for is input on a range of things. One, what do our potential partners see as the best packaging of different elements in order to create greater synergy, remove interfaces, reduce time, out through what might attract investment at some point. You know, when obviously we're not assuming anyone's going to invest before it's the right time to invest. But we're looking for input on all that, and in a way that we can reference, and not just be our view of what the market is. We want to hear directly from them. And that ties in part to the peer review group. The legislative peer review group has indicated that its primary focus in looking at our business plan going forward is going to be our discussion of the business model and how we intend to move forward in delivering this and ultimately operating it. So another byproduct of this will be to help inform that discussion and inform them and the legislature as we move ahead.
I guess my only issue here is that the uncertainty around cap and trade that we discussed before, Mr. Correa was asking about the nature of that. That is something that the California legislature, we know, is addressing right now through a number of vehicles to look at both the longevity, the tenor of the cap and trade program, and so forth. I would imagine that the outcome of that would have some bearing on how people would view the opportunities around the program. And so I'm just wondering, we have a schedule here that calls for people to come in 90 days after the release, which is going to be right at the end of the legislative session. So assuming that the legislature acts efficiently in dealing with that issue this term, it may not match up or flange up with the window in which people would be looking at creative solutions here. So that's number one. On the other hand, to the extent that in the legislative analysis of the cap and trade program's future, that we could help inform them about things that would, if they were components of that legislation, would facilitate earlier private sector interest, then I would think that the legislature would want to have that information. So on the one hand, this is a little bit too slow. On the other hand, it's a little bit too fast. So maybe there's a way to encourage a dialogue across the course of that would allow us to participate more effectively in the legislative process as it looks at this issue. So that was one point I wanted to make. The second point I wanted to make is that
I would suggest you, Dan,
yeah.
that in fact, by going forward on this basis, I mean, I have questions, but that's going forward on this basis. In fact, if something were to become available, I'm not sure what the percentage chance of that happening are, but if something were to become available on the basis that we sit today, it would only get better. Mm-hmm. So that you would probably want to proceed in any case, a little bit faster, a little bit slower. You want to go as fast as you could, if you thought there was something there, right?
Right. I agree with that. That makes perfect sense. But if there was some 5% piece that was missing, right, it'd be nice to know that. The one other thing I wanted to just say is that in looking at the key questions for the private sector, but also on the page before, the information to be provided, the last item on that list is legal requirements. And I would just want to make sure that we're making it absolutely clear to people, because we've wasted a fair amount of time with people coming in and saying, okay, we're happy to do this, we're ready to do this, we're ready to write checks. All you need to do is to provide us a floor of operating protection, right, which we cannot do consistent with the provisions of Prop 1A that don't allow for an operating subsidy. So let's just make sure we are crystal clear when we're going out to people, so we're not wasting their time or ours. That this is an area where there is a risk, it's a gap before we have an established ridership level, that that's the thing that I think you're really trying to plumb from the private sector, is what they're willing to do. But it can't be one of these assume a can opener things where they come in and say, I can do all this if you do something that we're just not legally empowered to do. So I would just say I think we need to be crystal clear in that part about the legal requirements, so we're not wasting everybody's time.
Agreed.
Okay.
So, board's wishes to continue. I mean, I think the discussion here has pretty much touched on all the key elements of the presentation, and I think it's probably better this discussion than my presentation. So, my wishes to the board, whatever you.
And I'm sure nobody intended to knock you off course
no, that's
with
fine.
the presentation, but well, let me just ask you, Mr. Vacca, are there other key things that you think are important for the board or the public to hear about this at this point that we haven't touched on?
No, I think the key point's been made. I think we're at a point in our program that we need to solicit as much input as we can from examples that have been tried around the world. We're at a point in our program in the next 6 to 12 months. We have some hard decisions to make on going forward on additional procurements, and it's timely in all those areas. So I think we look forward to the input, and we look forward to coming back to you to let you know what we've heard.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, so I think it's a good conversation. I think that initially, at least, I was lost in maybe the semantics of the language that was being used, and at least based upon previous conversations, this seemed well in advance of what we had talked about over the previous couple of 3 or 4 years. Understanding what you have in mind here, I think that's probably the reason for the reaction you had here, because it seemed like, this is a major aspect of the success of this program, and has been from the time that this chair took over. So it's just understanding the appropriate time at which we're asking for things, and what are we offering, as was just stated. And I think, as you've explained this, maybe there's been oral discussions where people have expressed interest and that sort of thing, and that's probably very accurate. And I think that probably numbers of us have had the same thing occur in various discussions, but it wasn't quite as set in stone as the statement would have indicated. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yes,
if I may,
Carter.
just wanted to also add a couple of comments, and that is that this is, I think, a very, very critical component of the success of this project, private sector investment. And thank you for your presentation. I just want to make sure the public, as well as the board here, is clear about the progress here and what is actually needed attract that private sector investment. So don't take it as a gotcha, but rather as we want to know. We want to be with you on this one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Morales.
Again, I think we're talking a range of input that we are expecting and hoping for here that would kind of at the far end of the range involve direct private investment, but before that would also involve private participation in the procurement of things and what are the most efficient ways of procuring things, both that give us the best advantage but also attract and make things the most attractive to them. And so we're looking for input on all those types of things. Frankly, part of what we're trying to avoid, and it is the tricky part of the timing, if we move forward on individual procurements, we may preclude the opportunity to package things more efficiently, more effectively. Mm-hmm. So we want to, get the best input we can so that we can move forward. And we've seen, great results so far just through the design-build process. But, we know from experience around the world that package procurements and tying things together is clearly the way to go. The question is, how do we get there? What's the right combination of things and at what time?
Yeah.
And just finally, just a reminder, we also have, apart from this, the board-approved unsolicited proposals ability, which
we did that before.
Can come in separate from this.
We appreciate the initiative.
Ms. Selby, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a request actually to continue, just to finish up the presentation. I think that would be helpful, just to hear the rest of the presentation, if you don't mind, Board.
Not at all.
Okay.
I can go through real quickly. I believe we were discussing the fact that the next round of procurements for the authority is going to be focused on the railroad systems, both signaling and communication, the track, power, and we've already been out with our EOI on train sets. We've seen in the international market that other systems have used a packaging approach on a lot of the procurements to be more efficient and to respond to technical challenges. And we're looking to kind of duplicate that efficiency and improve management here. And that's the entire purpose of this EOI. A couple of examples, Presidio Parkway here in California used a combining procurement approach, and they're touting a 25% cost savings and efficiency there. And the largest 3P in the high-speed rail market has been towards the Bordeaux TGV, which have been touting the real benefits of that 3P in that arena.
That's where we're going.
This is a formalized approach. As I said, we've been getting informal discussions, and the purpose here is to formalize the expressions of interest to determine whether we can move forward on a formal process of procurement in this avenue, or we continue on a case-by-case, project-by-project basis. We believe that there are significant efficiencies in packaging a lot of the procurements, both from a risk management perspective, a financing perspective, and an overall acceleration to the program. And that's what we're looking to hopefully see at the end of this process. This process will also be used to inform and further develop our 2016 business plan and to be a strategic plan for moving forward on all segments. We will be providing information to the industry to utilize for their feedback, and I list some of the documents we'll be providing. Our past business plans, our description of the potential procurements that we're looking forward to in the next 12 to 24 months, potential business model concepts, what our requirements are by law, so that they understand what our strategic vision is, what our mission is, and what our constraints are, so that they can provide a meaningful feedback to us so that we can utilize. And it's directed. Rather than try to just throw something against the wall and it might be scattered where we might not have common responses, we've tried to focus the response on specific questions so that we can evaluate common suggestions on approach. Some of the questions that we'll be focusing on involve, can we have cost savings? Can we have acceleration by combining procurements? Different iOS sections, do they envision different initial operating segments that might be better for the program? What is the effective size of a procurement or effective size of a project that can be managed? Those are the type of very specific questions we'd like to see answers to from the industry. And the time frame is by the end of this month. We hope to have a document out in the public arena and provide about a 90-day time period for them to review the documents and come back with their suggestions and their insight on this approach, and then have one-on-one meetings with those interested parties, and then come back to the board with an update.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Selby. I think that was the right thing to do. That's good. I just have one last comment on this, which is that, it's been said by other board members that this is important for us to, accelerate efforts to get the private sector involved. But I also, there are two things that I think are very important to keep in mind. The first is that this is an organization, both at the staff level and at the board level, that is very, very open to accepting of and desirous of other ideas that people have about the best and most efficient way to pursue this program. And I think when we're talking about a program of this magnitude, it's very important that we approach it that way. I think we've got highly competent staff, and we've had the benefit of excellent world-class contractors, but it doesn't mean that those of us in this organization are the font of all wisdom. And so being open to and wanting to receive other ideas, I think, will really benefit us, and that's something that should continue to be part of the culture here. The second thing I wanted to say is that something that people in government often don't say, which is that it may be that we go out right now and we don't get anything back that is allows us to move forward with private sector investment at this point. This is a very complex program that is bound up by some very strict legal requirements, and it may be that we have to get to a certain point in the future before the private sector is ready to come in. That is not a failure. We are going out to test the market, and we should continue to go out and test the market. And I've just, my entire life, been a huge devotee of what Franklin Roosevelt once said, which is we should be about bold, persistent experimentation. If something doesn't work, we try something else, or we try the same thing later when the conditions change. And it'll be very easy and very tempting for people to come back and say, oh, well, they went out and there was no interest or whatever. And that's simply a reflection of where we are in the evolution of this program. We do know, going back to the statements that were made before, that there is a huge amount of private sector interest swirling around. Whether that can be something that can be done on commercial terms in a financeable way depends on a number of other factors. But there is no question the private sector is interested. Can they get across that gap to a financeable relationship with us? I think this is a good time to go out and both solicit their ideas and to test that marketplace. But I want to make sure that we put this in the context that we should always be doing things like this, and we shouldn't be afraid if things come back not exactly where we would hope at any given point. So I just wanted to make those 2 points. All right, with that,
okay. Thank you.
Go forth and see what we get.